Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Namaskar and greetings of the day to all the students watching this video. I, Twinkle Chandarana, Assistant Professor English, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, welcome all of you in today's lecture. So friends, today we are going to continue our discussion on novel titled as Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. In today's session, we would be discussing the character analysis and major themes of the novel. Let us begin with the sharing of the popular facts about the novel. Before jumping on to the discussion, let me give an overview of the components of this presentation. This presentation or this discussion of the lecture consists of the popular facts of the novel, the character analysis, the themes and symbols of this novel, and then check your progress. So friends, let us begin today's lecture. The work was written between 1845 and 1846 and was published by Bronte herself after being rejected by many publishers. Bronte, aware of the patriarchal society at that time, wrote under the male pseudonym Alice Bell. Wuthering Heights was inspired by the surroundings of the author as she lived on the moors and also by the Gothic genre of literature, which was popular in the 19th century and often consisted of violence and the supernatural elements. The influence of Lord Byron and romantic figures in general is quite clear through her romantic characterization of Heathcliff, who is in essence a Byronic hero, and through her rhetorical devices that often center around her love for nature, which is a characteristic of romantic literature. The Wuthering Heights farmhouse is said to be based on the details of an actual farmhouse by the name of Top Withens, and the location is now widely accepted as the Wuthering Heights Monument. Emily Bronte received only negative criticism for the work Wuthering Heights and did not live to see it flourish and became one of the most famous and iconic novels in literary history. Wuthering Heights has had its fair share of adaptations into films and performance art, such as plays and ballet, and has also been adapted into foreign movies. So friends, let us now move forward to discuss the major characters and their traits. Since the characterization of this novel is quite a bit difficult, I have put up an image of the family tree of the characters so it would be easy for all of you to understand and relate with the images and the names of the characters. The first and important character we shall discuss is of Heathcliff. The male protagonist of the novel, Heathcliff, is a highly mysterious anti-hero around whom the whole story of the novel revolves. His character defies all the avenues of understanding his personality as an orphan brought up in a mansion. His unkindness surpasses almost all his positive traits. Heathcliff takes revenge against every other character, including Catherine and Edgar. A sadist in his own words, he tortures Isabella Linton just for the sake of enjoyment. Despite living with Hindley and Cathy after Earnshaw brings him home, he does not hesitate to hurt them even for minor errors. Eventually, he starts treating others very badly. This proves that the maltreatment received to him from Hindley and Cathy during his childhood had changed him to a bitter person. It only fades when he sees Catherine flirting with Hareton and embraces death peacefully. He wins sympathy for the life and loses he had endured. However, his behavior does not justify the reasons why he mistreats others. The second character to be discussed is of Catherine. The female protagonist of the novel, Catherine is an even tempered kind of woman and generous who attains prominence because of her different nature, unlike that of her mother, Cathy. Despite living a secluded and sheltered life, she understands Heathcliff's heartless and rude behavior towards Hareton, who is her cousin. But however, it does not show her wisdom in identifying the true characters of a person. She falls in love with Linton, who ditches her when Heathcliff threatens him. Despite her decision to marry him, she chooses to take care of him until his death. She finally comes to Hareton when she is tired of isolation at Wuthering Heights. Also, Heathcliff abandons her by taking the whole property, and with her cousin's help, she finally returns after gaining the property after Heathcliff dies. The third character to be discussed is of Mrs. Dean. Mrs. Dean or Nellie Dean is the narrator of the story when she explains the full history of Heathcliff to Mr. Lockwood, and on a few occasions her narration is biased as she begins to recollect her personal relationships with the characters. Despite performing her servant role, she is still considered as a foster sister to Cathy, Heathcliff, and Hindley. Throughout the novel, she is known for her caring and compassionate nature. She stays loyal to Cathy from her marriage while caring for her daughter Catherine. She becomes important for she is not only the caretaker but also a very loyal protector of the family. The fourth character is of Edgar. Edgar is the owner of Thrushcross Grange. He is extremely snobbish young man, though he becomes kind and gentle while he is growing up. Edgar decides to marry Cathy and stays loyal to her throughout his life. Edgar is partially the reason for Cathy's death when he picks up a brawl with Heathcliff merely for jealousy. That is why he becomes wary of Heathcliff in later life to save his daughter from his likely revenge. And ironically, his fears prove true when he dies and Heathcliff takes charge of Thrushcross Grange. The fifth character is of Hareton. Hareton is Catherine's cousin who loses his father shortly after he loses his mother. He is a very interesting character and lives a simple life. Hareton knows nothing about the upper class society and cultured manners. He gets offended easily and he has a very kind heart. However, when he meets Catherine, he comes to know about his brutish manners, which makes him shun society and education. When they are forced to live at Wuthering Heights, he surrenders to before the very girl he has hated. Catherine teaches him to read and write, including manners. Eventually, they fall in love with each other. The next character to be discussed is of Hindley Earnshaw. Hindley is Mr. Earnshaw's son and Catherine's brother. He resents the arrival of Heathcliff, and once Mr. Earnshaw dies, he abuses Heathcliff. Later, it costs him dearly when Heathcliff becomes master of the house Wuthering Heights. He lapses into depression and alcohol consumption later when his wife dies, leaving him and his son Hareton alone. Eventually, Hindley also succumbs to grief and dies shortly. The next character to be discussed is of Linton Heathcliff. He is Isabella and Heathcliff's son. He is always weak, whimpering, and physically ill. Linton never relates to his father. He stays away from his jealousy-stricken nature for most of his childhood years. He comes to live with him only when his mother leaves him for good. And Linton does not like his father. However, Heathcliff exploits Linton's innocence to marry him to Catherine and strengthen his hold on Thrushcross Grange. After months of his marriage, Linton dies. The next in the row to be discussed is the character of Isabella Linton. She is Edgar Linton's sister and she marries Heathcliff out of this love. At first, Isabella perceives Heathcliff as an imaginary romantic character from a novel. However, later she realizes that she had ruined her prospects. Heathcliff does not love her back. She is abused by Heathcliff to exact revenge from the Linton family. She is unable to understand the world around her, the reason that she falls into the trap of Heathcliff. However, after marrying him, she radically changes into a hysterical and delirious person. The next character to be discussed is of Mr. Earnshaw. He is Hindley's and Catherine's father. He adopts Heathcliff and brings him to his home. However, his family refuses to accept Heathcliff and mistreats him. He although prefers Heathcliff over Hindley, he gives Wuthering Heights to Hindley. And the last character to be discussed is of Mr. Linton. Mr. Linton is the husband of Catherine Earnshaw. He also suffers along with other characters at the hands of Heathcliff. He had also treated Heathcliff badly during his childhood days. However, one thing about him is praiseworthy, that despite heavy odds against him, in contrast, the love between Catherine and Edgar is proper and civilized rather than passionate. Theirs is a love of peace and comfort, a socially acceptable love, but it cannot stand in the way of Heathcliff and Catherine's more profound and more violent connection. The love between Cathy and Linton is a grotesque exaggeration of that between Catherine and Edgar. While Catherine always seems just a bit too strong for Edgar, Cathy and Linton's love is founded on Linton's weakness, and Linton gets Cathy to love him by playing on her desire to protect and mother him. Finally, there is the love between Cathy and Hareton, which seems to balance the traits of the other loves on the display. They have the passion of Catherine and Heathcliff without the destructiveness and the gentleness shared by Edgar and Catherine without the dullness or inequality in power. It is not easy to decide whether Bronte intends the reader to condemn these lovers as blameworthy or to idealize them as romantic heroes whose love transcends social norms and conventional morality. The book is actually structured around two parallel love stories. The first half of the novel centering on the love between Catherine and Heathcliff, while the less dramatic second half features the developing love between young Catherine and Hareton. In contrast to the first, the later tale ends happily, restoring peace and order to Wuthering Heights as well as Thrushcross Grange. And the last theme to be discussed is the precariousness of social class. As members of the gentry, the Earnshaws and the Lintons occupy a somewhat precarious place within the hierarchy of late 18th and early 19th century British society. At the top of British society was the royalty, followed by the aristocracy, then by the gentry, and then by the lower classes, who made up the vast majority of the population. Although the gentry or upper middle class possessed servants and often large estates, they held a nonetheless fragile social position. The social status of aristocrats was a formal and settled matter because aristocrats had official titles. Considerations of class status often crucially inform the character's motivations in this work. Catherine's decision to marry Edgar so that she will be the greatest woman of the neighborhood is the only most obvious example of this instance. The Lintons are relatively firm in their gentry status, but nonetheless take great pains to prove this status through their behaviors. The Earnshaws, on the other hand, rest on much shakier ground socially. They do not have a carriage, They have less land, and their house, as Lockwood remarks with great puzzlement, resembles that of a homely northern farmer and not that of a gentleman. The shifting nature of social status is demonstrated most strikingly in Heathcliff's trajectory from homeless waif to young gentleman by adoption to common labourer to gentleman again. Friends, these were the major themes of the novel. Let us now have a glance over the symbols used in this novel. The first one being the symbol of Wuthering Heights, the home. The childhood home of many of the book's characters, Wuthering Heights is a centuries old farmhouse that symbolizes simplicity, wildness, and passion. Sturdy, substantial, and stubborn, the house is at one with the surrounding moors. It is fierce but unchanging. Its inhabitants share its characteristics like it or not. They are in touch with their raw, natural, and animalistic instincts. Wuthering Heights stands for unfettered primal emotions and it is nature. The second symbol is of Thrushcross Grange. The house was owned by the Lintons and then inhabited by Lockwood. Is a symbol of tamed, refined, civilized culture. Even when Heathcliff owns it, he chooses to rent it rather than live in it, for its formality does not suit the likes of him. In contrast to Wuthering Heights, the Grange stands for manners and civility. It is an outpost of education and urbanity in the midst of the wildness of the northern English moors. And the last symbol to be discussed is of weather. The frequent storms and wind that sweep through Wuthering Heights symbolize how the characters are at the mercy of forces they cannot control. For example, Lockwood, the city boy, thinks he can walk back to Thrushcross Grange through a storm, but the nature, respective folks at Wuthering Heights tell him he is crazy. They know that the weather nature is far stronger than he is. Bronte uses the weather as a metaphor for nature, which she portrays as a magnificently strong force that can conquer any character. The strongest characters are those who give the weather the respect that it deserves. Friends, let us now discuss the check your progress portion. The first question is an attempt a detailed note on the characterization in the novel Wuthering Heights, and the second question is of elaborate your views on the major themes of the Gothic novel titled as Wuthering Heights. Friends, having discussed the major characters of the novel, let us now discuss the themes covered and reflected by Bronte. The first theme is of the futility of revenge. Nearly all of the action in Wuthering Heights results from one or another character's desire for revenge. The result is cycles of revenge that seem to endlessly repeat. Hindley takes revenge on Heathcliff for taking his place at Wuthering Heights by denying him an education and in the process separates Heathcliff and Catherine. Heathcliff then takes revenge upon Hindley by first disposing Hindley of Wuthering Heights and by denying an education to Hareton, that is Hindley's son. Heathcliff also seeks revenge on Edgar for marrying Catherine by marrying Cathy to Linton. Yet, while Heathcliff's revenge is effective, it seems to bring him little joy. Late in the novel, Cathy sees this and tells Heathcliff that her revenge on him, no matter how miserable he makes her, is to know that he, Heathcliff, is more miserable. And it is instructive that only when Heathcliff loses his desire for revenge is he able to finally reconnect with Catherine in death and to allow Cathy and Hareton, who are so similar to Heathcliff and Catherine, to find love and marry. The second theme to be discussed is of masculinity and femininity, written when gender roles were far more rigid and defined than they are now. Wuthering Heights examines stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. Emily Bronte constantly contrasts masculinity and femininity, but not of the comparisons are simple. Edgar Linton and Linton Heathcliff are men, but Bronte frequently describes them as having the looks and attributes of woman. Likewise, Catherine Earnshaw has many masculine characteristics. Even though she is outrageously beautiful, she loves rough outdoor play and can hold her own in any fight. She is a complex mix of hyper feminine grace and loveliness and ultra masculine anger and recklessness. Heathcliff, with his physical and mental toughness, has no such ambiguities. He is exaggeratedly masculine and scorns his wife Isabella for her overblown femininity. It seems that Emily Bronte favors masculinity over femininity, even in her woman characters. In general, she portrays weak, delicate characters with contempt, while she treats strong and rugged characters like Heathcliff, both Catherine's and Hareton, with compassion and admiration, despite their flaws. The third theme to be discussed is of Gothic literature and supernatural. From beginning to end, Wuthering Heights is a novel full of ghosts and spirits. Dead characters refuse to leave the living alone, and the living accept that the deceased find ways of coming back to haunt them. In a departure from traditional Gothic tales, these hauntings are sometimes welcome. Heathcliff, for instance, repeatedly seeks out visitations from the ghost of his beloved Catherine. He even digs up her grave in order to be closer to her. Bronte uses otherworldly figures to emphasize the ferocity of Heathcliff's and Catherine's love. Their connection is so powerful that even death cannot stop it. The next theme to be discussed is of love and passion. Wuthering Heights explores a variety of kind of love. Love on display in the novel includes Heathcliff and Catherine's all-consuming passion for each other, which, while noble in its purity, is also terribly destructive. So friends, bringing this session on a concluding note, I hope that you must have understood the concepts discussed in today's session. We will discuss other such works in the next lecture series. Thank you.